Now that Mikel Arteta's been at Arsenal for more than 5 years, in that time he has won one FA Cup. Have the club underachieved under him? It's a very nice way of saying, has Mikel Arteta underachieved?
Yeah.
But he wants to take a holistic approach, I suppose. Jim Campbell, I'm duty bound to come to you.
Well, actually, because obviously we come at this through quite different lenses. I'm interested in what you guys think about this first. Obviously, my thoughts are quite clear on it. But
Was the FA Cup the first season?
yes,
Yeah.
He beat Frank Lampard's Chelsea in the final.
There we go.
and Pep's Man City in the semi.
Yes.
Okay. So, I'll go first if you want.
Far away, old boy.
I think it's a really interesting question, and I think it's the reason for that is because at some point that question has to be asked, because at some point clearly you don't get to carry on a job at that level forever without winning things.
I think it's beginning to be asked.
Yeah, and well, clearly it is. It has literally been asked on here. And so, but I think it's important to think about the context, right? So what Arsenal were in when Arteta came in was this post-Wenger environment. I know that Emery had been in the job and had done what he had done, but actually he was probably ultimately always destined to fail for a number of reasons. But we're still looking at a post-Wenger environment when Arteta comes in. And what Arteta has been able to do is to at least change, and I would say improve, the identity of them as a team, certainly from the kind of latter stages, the kind of après-moi le deluge version of Wenger's Arsenal, which obviously was becoming untenable for a number of different reasons. So it has to be seen in that context. The other way of looking at it is has there been improvement? And I think in league position, there has been improvement, right?
Undoubtedly.
Because they go eighth again, fifth, second. And the one of those second places was a full-blooded, wholehearted tilt of the title. Yeah. It wasn't a second the same way they finished above Spurs on the final day when Leicester won it by coming second.
I think it was their second highest points total, so more points than previous title-winning seasons.
Yeah, the only time they'd ever got more than 89 points was when they did 90 under Wenger in 2004 when they won it. So all those things are good. But what I would throw into the mix on there is I would say that so I think when seen in the round, I don't think he's underachieved. I think he's done a really good job, because even if nothing else, he's given them a really stable, solid footing about who they want to be and what they can be as a team in a post-Wenger environment, which is not just really important, but fucking totally necessary. Mm-hmm. If you were going to flip onto the other side of the coin and say, well, how could we think of ways where maybe he hasn't been as good as he can? And I think the answer to that would probably be they've not done anywhere near what they could have done in, say, those seasons they had in the Europa League, where really, I mean, if you're going for the Andy Brassel school of thought, a team the size of Arsenal, with the players Arsenal have got, the budget they've got, should really be doing a lot better than the round of 16 or the round of 32 in his first season.
I mean, that season when they were flying and they were lost, was it on penalties to Sporting?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was the semi-final year, was it?
No, that was
earlier.
That was. It might even have been the last 16.
I think it might have been, Jim. It wasn't semi-final.
What, his first season?
No. This was when they were flying. And
2 seasons ago.
Oh yeah, that was the round of 16. That's right. So,
yeah, you're right to say, because
I forgot that was the team they were playing.
I mean, a Europa League win, I think, probably would make this question in a year's time.
Yeah.
And also, in the FA Cup itself, they've done nothing since. Yeah, nothing. So it's a bit of it. So let me just finish the point. I think it's a very interesting question because there's multiple ways of looking at it. I would fall down the side of the fence that says he's been really good for Arsenal. He's been exactly what they needed. Just to reiterate that point, it wasn't just important for Arsenal fans and the club to be able to envisage a future post-Wenger. It was totally necessary. Yeah. And he's been able to he's been big enough as a character, stuck around long enough, and been able to impose his will on the club well enough for them to now feel like they are a proper competing club again. And that kind of stuff, I think, feels like it's quite easy to forget, and I don't think it should be forgotten. But there's definitely been areas on the pitch where they could have been quite a bit better. I don't think the league is that, because I think 2 second places in a row in this era of dominance that City have had is more than creditable, actually. So I'm not talking league titles here. I am saying in some of the other competitions they could have been better, but overall I think he's been good, and I don't think you can judge him as harshly as the question implies.
Yeah, I think the Cup's point is a good one, because his record in knockout competition really isn't great, and successful teams are successful across competitions and across formats, and that is something that I think does have to improve. I can imagine Arteta being at Arsenal for quite a while yet, barring some sort of like quite dramatic turnaround in fortunes. But this is something he has to address, you know. The Champions League last season, you go out in the quarterfinal to Bayern Munich. Obviously that can happen and does happen to many teams, but the circumstances of it weren't great because, you know, they gave away 2 really silly goals in the first leg. They could have won that first leg 2-0 and then you're in such a strong position from that. So that is perhaps a little bit of possibly even still naivety that needs to be ironed out. So that's something to think about. Another stick to beat him with is a more recent one, which is in terms of the recruitment of this summer. So he's got a lot more power at Arsenal now than he's had before. And the story goes that he had to convince the board over both Riccardo Calafiori and Mikel Merino and really sort of fight their corners in terms of bringing them in as signings. They did come in. Neither have really shown what they were brought in to do yet. Obviously, it's early days and they've both been hampered by injury a bit, and that might not be the case. But that is another thing that is potentially, you know, something you kind of question him about. But I think getting Arsenal to be competitive in the league again, back into the Champions League, was massively, massively important, and something that has taken a lot of work. Those 2 seasons where they finished 8th were a grind and were hard work and were not a lot of fun. And like, if you look at the squads that, you know, his first squad compared to the current squad, it's amazing quite how much has turned around. And I suppose you could argue we've spent a lot of money, but also in terms of getting Arsenal back into the Champions League, you know, they've made a lot of money, which is something that has to be factored into it as well, because, you know, the 8th, just completely floundering and really, really far away. So I think you can make the argument that he's underachieved, but I would think you would do so, you know, with a lowercase u and possibly even in inverted commas.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. I mean, I think with Arteta, I mean, let's say he had won another trophy. I mean, the last 5 years, Manchester United have won 2 trophies.
But interesting, I mean, that, isn't it?
You know, I mean,
and that speaks to the idea that cup competitions are worth less than the league by miles.
And yeah, indeed, I think that's the juxtaposition. What are you comparing this to? Arsenal are in a far better position than Manchester United. Mikel Arteta has done a much better job with Arsenal than Erik ten Hag did with Manchester United. Erik ten Hag won 2 trophies to Arteta's one in a short space of time.
The devil's in the detail, yeah.
So what are you doing? I think that the better comparison would be, say, Jurgen Klopp. And with Klopp at Liverpool, a bit like Arteta, it took him a little time to get going. But once they got going, you know, my goodness. And you can say, well, just the 1 league title was that disappointing. But then you compare it to Guardiola and Man City.
Champions League as well, though.
Yeah, but this is it, Luke.
Yeah.
But they've got the League Cup, the FA Cup. They won everything else.
Yeah.
And they were...
the tangibles, right?
The tangibles. Matter. I was going to say a winning machine, but that's more you would say about Man City. But certainly, I think if under Klopp, you know, they were gobbling up a fair few trophies. And, you know, trophies aren't always the thing to judge success with, but they are the ultimate indication or vindication, if you like, of what you're doing in your successes. I think Arteta at the moment is fine. I don't think Arsenal will win a trophy this season. There's still time to do that, but that was what I would think. I think in 18 months' time, if Arsenal still haven't won a trophy, then I think, you know, because I think he's very, very slowly slipping into Gareth Southgate England territory here. He's changed the mood at the club, got them playing again, got the spirit and got everybody up for it. And suddenly there was the enormous interest at the Emirates. You've spoken, Jim, a number of times, and it's been well documented about the atmosphere in the Emirates on certain occasions being quite something.
That's changing now, though, because of expectation.
There you go. And that's what happens. So you have a grace period where you go, do you know what? Yeah, we finished second in the league, but my goodness, isn't it so much better? And with that, though, you think, right, and you've got to go that extra step. Southgate was very close, but didn't quite do it. You know, I love the man, but for some England fans, there were a section of England fans, they felt disappointed with Southgate, and they felt that perhaps he should have gone earlier, etc., etc., etc. If this goes on, as I say, I think next season, if they don't win a trophy again, then I think Mikel Arteta, it becomes a situation where you kind of go, but we've finished second again, or actually we had a good run. And he's changed the club. He's like, yeah, but he's already done that. You've then got to go that extra step. And, you know, in 2 years' time, is Thomas Tuchel going to be Arsenal manager?
I think actually Klopp is a very useful example of what happens if you do stick with a guy who keeps knocking on the door and keeps kind of, you know, threatening to do something brilliant. Because essentially, eventually, that Klopp did do that, didn't he? So,
but he was winning other competitions.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose you would point to Arteta's FA Cup for the proof of that as well, though. But I think it is a very useful example for Arteta, like having Klopp there go, look, this can be what it takes.
Yeah, I think
the comparison with Klopp is interesting for the reasons you've already stated, but it's also clear that, respectfully, partly because of the fact that Arteta's more towards the beginning of his coaching journey, Klopp's a much better manager than Arteta.
Of course.
And what Klopp, as you've already said, was able to do was post Liverpool at a far higher level than Arteta's been able to post Arsenal. And there's different reasons for that. It's not just down to the quality of the coach necessarily, to the size of the club and the environment and the context. The stuff that Klopp was doing with Liverpool and not winning stuff was still fucking amazing. Like at one point they got 97 points and didn't win the league. They've got 92 points and didn't win the league. They picked up all the other trophies as well. I think you've got to understand the context, and you also have to understand the context of Arteta at Arsenal as well. We don't know. We're still in this weird holding pattern that we have to keep mentioning about what level of improper conduct, if you like, Manchester City have been exhibiting, which informs all of this stuff. The reason it informs all this stuff is because if they are guilty of certain things, which means that they were, playing to a set of different set of rules to say Liverpool and Arsenal were, both those teams were affected. Both those teams, Arsenal have come second 2 seasons in a row. Liverpool came second a couple of times behind City in that era. So I don't think that means that Arteta hasn't done a really good job. I think it means that it depends how much you value kind of individual trophies. Because if Arteta picks up a League Cup next season, well, so what? Does that really move the dial? Does that matter?
No,
maybe it does. I don't know. I'm just asking.
I think it's a fair question.
I think it depends on the title challenge of that season, doesn't it? Essentially, it's a bauble on the tree of the league season.
Yeah, no, but I guess the angle I'm coming at it from is that no one in 25 years' time doing a retrospective on Arteta's management career is going to go, oh, do you remember when he picked up that League Cup?
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, if they finish fifth and win the League Cup means nothing. If they finish second and win a cup, it's way more meaningful.
But I think the reason why I compare to Klopp is because Liverpool went so close under him a few times. Then they had their sort of season off, if you like, where they still finished respectably, of course. But in the meantime, they were winning a trophy here and there. Yeah. And I think that puts it to bed. And so therefore you can say, but we see the improvement with Klopp. We see where we're going.
Because they never went more than 1 year without winning something.
Exactly. And I think that's the difference with Arteta. If he was picking it up, even if it was a League Cup and an FA Cup here and there, I understand he won the FA Cup, but it seems like a lifetime ago. It's a very different team and a very different cycle. I think that makes this question, you would change the question to, if he doesn't win a league title, then what? The league title is crucial. I think if he won the Champions League, I think that would put it to bed. But I think, like I say, I could think he could be at Arsenal for a long, long time. But if he doesn't win a trophy in the next 18 months, then I think this question becomes louder and more people start asking it. In 2 seasons, 3 seasons, because they're finishing second, they're doing well, they're latter stages.
Because it becomes a discussion about, okay, thank you for everything you've done to get us back up to this level.
Exactly.
But you've taken us as far as you can.
Exactly.
And it depends whether Jim will be much better positioned than you or I to answer this because he's an Arsenal fan. It depends on, as a fan of the club who cares about the club more than any other club, where you draw that line.
Yeah. Well, that will...
where will you draw that line?
I think he's
by his seat, probably.
Yeah. I think he's got a lot of goodwill in my personal tank, but I think generally with everybody as well. I think he'd have a couple of seasons at least without a trophy, as long as the standards were high enough that they're more competitive. Yeah. Being competitive was the main aim. Getting back into the Champions League was the main aim, but. We're at that stage of the project now, right? We're at that stage of the process where it's putting that cherry on top. Obviously, it's the hardest bit. So I do think he's got a little while left yet, but I think that 18-month timescale is probably reasonable for people to start getting a little bit restless. And, stadiums turn, don't they? It's fine at the moment, but that's a big thing.
Indeed. And if Liverpool go on to win the league, which we expect them to do, then suddenly then the Pep Guardiola Man City, they're the team who get 90 plus points. And then you see Chelsea, and you know what I mean? And if you see other teams moving up, then you think this guy's got a glass ceiling.
I think part of it as well is they are a bit more predictable this season, so that he has to address that.
Yeah, indeed. All right, let's have a quick break and we'll answer more of the questions after this. Luke Moore, you've got the next question.
I have, apparently. Thank you for reminding me. This is from Paul on YouTube.
Paulie!
Thank you very much, Paul, for engaging with us on the YouTube channel. That is available to everyone. Just type in Football Ramble into YouTube and you can subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notifications button. Be a part of it.
Like the shit out of the videos.
It's the fastest growing YouTube channel I've seen for ages. It's doing really well. So that's testament to the production team. Anyway, thank you, Paul. Paul says, if you were to flash forward from the start of the Ramble in 2007 to now.
Well, like a flash forward, not fast forward. We're going to
flash forward.
Yes.
What developments from world football do you think would surprise you the most?
Ooh, England reaching 2 finals.
That's a big one.
Yeah,
That's definitely a big one.
Genuinely, I think
absolute doldrums, wasn't it?
That felt like the sort of thing people would laugh at you for dreaming about, didn't it? Even getting to finals. Like, it really, really did. The reinvention under Southgate. I mean, obviously, we're sort of flashing forward quite a bit through a lot of managers, but, you know, Southgate didn't really want the job, did he? So we thought it was going to be more of the same, thought it might actually be
Well, you had to reach the very bottom before you could get up again.
But I suppose, though, but if someone said to you in 2007, you know, England obviously were perennial underachievers. So 2007, sandwiched between a disappointing exit from a quarter-final of a World Cup to not qualify for Euro 2008. If someone said, well, don't worry, because in 15 years' time, England actually will become one of the stronger nations on the international scene. They'll even get to a final or two of the Euros. I don't think that would be that surprising, though. So
for me, I think that's a really good point, because these things tend to be cyclical. For me, the big development that has changed the game unrecognisably without us properly noticing or appreciating how much it's changed is VAR.
It's got to be, isn't it?
Because if you go back and watch games from that period, it's a completely different game now. And some people, you know, will defend it, or some people say it just needs a tweak, or, you know, it's important to bring it up to speed and embrace the technology and all that good stuff. And even if you are supportive of it, that's absolutely fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But I don't think you can make an argument that the game's not totally different.
How much technology was knocking around in sport in 2007?
Was it pre-Hawkeye even? Pre-goal line technology?
Yeah, maybe? I mean, it's certainly, I think, and do remember, it's 2007. We're not saying 7 or 8 years ago when people started talking about should we introduce technology. In 2007, we're talking 18 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, Luke, to say that 18 years ago, if someone had said, you know what, in the future, you're going to see teams celebrate goals and then they're going to get goals chalked off because there was actually a penalty up the other end.
Yeah.
And then they're going to give the penalty. You'd be like...
There's no goal on set because of Lampard in 2010. That was before.
Yes.
That was before goal on set then.
2012 it was brought in.
Right, okay.
So there you go. And I think goal line technology, again, because it's binary, we're all...
But you're right,
the
way that key memorable moments of the game are now celebrated or observed even, is totally different.
Well, you said to Ireland fans, you know that goal against France, France scored against Ireland?
The handball for
Thierry Henry. Oh, yeah, in the future, that kind of thing will be chalked off.
But that's
like, what?
It's better, though, isn't it?
I'm not against VAR, but I'm saying that it's a surprising development. Sure. Again, you have to remember, we're going back to 2007. It's not, as you've been doing it and a few years ago. And so in 2007, if you know, someone had said that, you know, football's going to develop this way, I think VAR is the obvious one. To cherry pick another sort of silly one, you know, if someone was to say that a team who'd survived relegation 1 year in the Premier League, and it was a relegation battle, would then go on and win the league, play in the Champions League, and then go back down.
But that's not a development in world football, though, is it? Well,
but in football... Okay, you're talking about the whole thing.
I just think how the game broadly is consumed.
Okay, so here's one for you then. And Jonathan Wilson wrote a really nice piece actually about James Rodriguez with regards to this issue recently. I think that how football has developed, obviously more sort of tactically, but running, industry, pressing, all that stuff is more important now than you could maybe argue than it's ever been.
Totally agree.
But those types of mercurial number 10s and the players that we used to love watching are now kind of rendered obsolete. In 2007, there was already talk about the traditional number 9 going by the way. So, you know, much was made about Michael Owen. And in 2007, you've got the likes of Didier Drogba, all singing, all dancing centre forwards who can, he's helping out defending, he's heading away corners, he's linking the play. You're the lone striker, 4-3-3. You've got one up there. You don't have big man, little man.
That's a really interesting point, because I think I would throw into that in 2007, Juan Roman Riquelme is still playing for Argentina.
And in 2006...
It's hard for him to think about him having a top-level career now.
Well, exactly, yeah. Exactly. You needed the industry.
Not just because he's 46, but just because of the way he played.
No, I get the point. I wasn't going to be churlish there.
Part of that's coaching, isn't it, I think? That it's become a lot more kind of uniform around the world.
Because academy players.
Academy players and just sort of general coaching techniques in the top level, possibly because information is just, when something's successful, it's just sort of shared everywhere. I think technique is just a non-negotiable now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you have to do all the other stuff as well to give you those advantages. Like the basics are like the finesse now almost.
Sure, absolutely right. Yeah, I think that.
But I think that, to be fair though, that it's arguable to suggest that could come round again.
Possibly because...
But I think with VAR, the genie's out the bottle now, and out the lamp, and you can't put it back in.
When you say it could come back round again, fine. But really, other than when Pep's tinkering with his teams and so on...
No, but what I mean is... Sorry to cut him, but what I mean is you could see that the stuff you're talking about, the athleticism, the pressing, the what you need athletically to be a top-level player now, and Jim's talking about automatic touch and stuff. If it gets to the point where everyone's like that... then you are looking again for a point of difference, and it might just be loads of skill again.
Sure, yeah, but not in the same way.
It won't be in the same way, but it'll still be a cyclical thing.
But it's still a development, though, even if it's cyclical. But I mean, some things are cyclical in football, some things aren't. I mean, we've not really seen, say, the 4-4-2 come back in this country, and I don't think it ever would in the same way that it was. You know, nobody really sort of plays the WM or 2-3-5 anymore, unless Pep's having a proper old tinker and his team's right on top of it and so on. So,
well, to just add to that point as well, we're in an era where it's sort of acknowledged that the formation in which a team starts doesn't actually really bear that much relation to what goes on in the game, given how much teams shift in their positions and their formations dependent on what's happening in the game. So you're probably right there.
Yeah,
4-4-2 might come back and we might not even notice because it only happens in 10 minutes.
That's it. And I don't want to get too detailed about it, but I basically was at Paris Saint-Germain earlier this season and saw Atletico Madrid basically play a 4-4-2.
Yeah,
it's a different variation of it.
Indeed,
but they do it.
Yeah, they do, and that's fair.
I don't think tactical things are a great answer to this question, because I just think.
Well, my answer was about mercurial sort of number 10s who play in a certain style.
Those types of players have disappeared, and it's hard to think of them.
And the reason why, so go all the way back to that, and one of the reasons why is that those types of players were seen as maybe luxury players, or they weren't lazy, but they were seen as it's the tracking back, it's doing the jobs that you don't. Think about it in the 90s. You don't want Roberto Baggio tracking back, do you? You don't want that. You don't want certain players, but he's doing his doggies and so. No, you want him to be finding the space, and when he gets the ball, he can do his thing.
But I'm sorry, I just feel like, the question is, what would surprise you the most?
Well, it would surprise me to think
that's not surprising.
It would surprise me that a lot of the players that we loved, and as I say, those types of mercurial players, would become almost a bit obsolete, and you wouldn't have those types of players anymore. You would look at players differently.
But I just think in 2007, given what Jim's already said about Hawkeye and stuff and goal line tech being so far away, you're 5 years away from that even. The way the game is now with VAR is totally different.
But I said that's the ultimate. That's the best answer.
That's got to be the ultimate answer.
Yeah, well, I'm also just saying that this is also would be a surprising development.
One for me. And bearing in mind that in 2007 we were already laughing at FIFA a lot for how sort of brazenly corrupt they were. Yeah. Quite how extreme that has become, I think, would have shocked even me.
It's just it's also reflective of just what public life is like now.
But and also to add to that as well, I think the development being that the Middle East and Saudi in particular has such an influence on the game, and the way World Cups are kind of, let's be honest, handed out now. That has been a sort of a surprising development, because you used to think to yourself, it's all for the best bid.
Yeah.
But now it's...
Exactly, yeah. FIFA never felt like they were sort of these kind of, altruistic custodians of the game, did they? They were always clearly not that. But as you say, there was a sense that, the best bid meant something. Yeah. Now that's
because
gone.
Back then it took years for us to find out it was corrupt behind the scenes. Now it's just corrupt in plain sight.
But,
not even Fabio Cannavaro was going to the Middle East in 2007.
No, he wasn't. And the fact is that FIFA awarded they can award World Cups now to countries which need to build most of the stadiums for the damn competition.
In some cases, the cities.
Yes, exactly.
Or a city.
So yes, before we depress everybody too much, Jim, you've got the next question.
I do. Ben has been in touch on email. He says, given Manchester United struggles under 6 different head coaches since Alex Ferguson left the club in 2013, do you think even Sir Alex at his best would be able to get this team back to winning titles?
He would definitely get a better tune out of them. There's no doubt about that. I mean, with Ferguson, the club was shaped around him. He was the king of that club, despite King Eric and all that. But he was the dictator there.
It was the emperor. If Eric was the king,
emperor is the word or the title, and so with that kind of confidence he had, and with that kind of aura and so on, then yes, absolutely, he would be able to get a better tune out of them. Winning titles? No, I don't think so. I don't think this squad is good enough to win titles, given what Liverpool have at the moment, and I would even say Arsenal as well, and Nuno at Forest. But I don't. This team is not a title-winning team. The team that we saw win the title, when you thought, blimey, Ferguson really did get every last note out of them, was his final season, of course, when they signed Van Persie. But the signing of Van Persie, it's such a huge signing, a guy who was a proven goalscorer in the Premier League and a vital component. You still had Wayne Rooney there, who was putting forward. You think about that kind of star quality. Bruno Fernandes is really maybe the only one. I know Garnacho is a good player, but this squad is not good enough.
It's been thin gruel, hasn't it?
It has. One of Ferguson's most impressive things that he could do, of course, would be to adapt as time would go on. So whatever one may think of tactics and back in 2013, he would be very much he would have his head on with regards to what's going on now. And so I think that therefore his pragmatism and his character, and as I say, his emperor-like qualities would be able to get a team like this firmly in the top half. And I would say, realistically, if I was going to do that, I think they would be challenging probably for Champions League, bearing in mind some of the other sides, Man City not having a great season and whatnot. But I don't think that he would be able to get this team even back.
If he's parachuted into this team, sure. If we may extend the boundary of the question a little bit and think, say, he's been there a little while, or he never left and he's a bit younger or whatever, I don't think they'd be in the situation they were in under him, regardless of what happened off the field. They have been a bit of a laughing stock for a lot of reasons, and that sort of stuff just never ever happened under him. They were never silly. Barely a day goes by now without some daft story coming out. And I think an interesting thing to look at in terms of his record is points totals. So the highest Ferguson got was 92. Lots of teams have gone higher than that since, including a Liverpool team who finished second on 97 and one who matched 92, finishing second. But I'm tempted to think that might be a bit of a almost red herring, if that's the right term, because Ferguson's genius was just essentially adapting to absolutely anything, was it?
Well, I think there's an irony in the question, right? Because the football world is different now. Ferguson leaves in 2013. We're 12 years on. That's a lifetime in football, right? And I don't think most people agree it's not really possible for a manager of his style to oversee absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And for all the good things he's done, I think he's the best manager in English history. So to put my cards on the table, but for all the good things he's done, there's some stuff there that isn't particularly great, and including the big spectre at the feast, if you like, which is that, well, how have Man United been allowed to get into this state? They've been allowed to get into this state because of the Glazers takeover. Who waved the Glazers takeover through? The most powerful person at the club, who was quoted as saying, the Glazers are excellent, they're brilliant to work with, etc., etc. I have found the owners excellent without question. They have never failed in their promises, and they've been very supportive in everything we've done. They have demonstrated their commitment by purchasing players, etc., etc. Alex Ferguson. He's the one who oversaw this. He's the one who probably, arguably, had the power to step in and say, this is not great for us, and he didn't do that.
But at the time, was it okay though?
So I think there was a pretty big outcry of how they were going to do it with their leverage buyout that Ferguson could have done something about. I would also add,
you think he would have had that much power that he could have stopped the stuff much further upstairs?
He is the singular most important person in that club's history.
Sure.
And I think
but he's not the one making those decisions.
He's not. But look, It depends which way you look at it.
We can debate this till the cows come home.
We can. Well, that's why we're here. We can. It's very easy to imagine a situation where at that time he comes out and says, this is not in the best interest of this club. And there wouldn't be a single Man United fan in the world that wouldn't have backed him. So you can answer it in that way. So to me,
as Jim says, though, whether that influences the decision or not.
Well,
we can only speculate, can't we?
I think Alex Ferguson was a fairly important reason as to why the Glazers wanted the club in the first place. Okay. I mean, they're the biggest club in the world at that point, with the possible exception of Real Madrid.
So that goes into my point, though, that or what I was going to say earlier is, so he's the reason. So if Ferguson's still there, does all this bollocks still happen?
I guess my answer to that would be, bar that one big mistake, because all the stuff that Roy Keane says about Alex Ferguson, which I won't repeat on here because we'll probably get in legal trouble, is kind of fine, but because in terms of the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really affect anything. So if he talks about Alex Ferguson treating Darren Ferguson too kindly or giving his brother a job or whatever, that may well be fair criticism by Keane, but actually you can defend that by saying, well, the results speak for themselves. Yes. The one big decision he had an input into was the Glazers takeover, in my view, and that was wrong. So do I think that Ferguson could have got this team right now back to winning titles? No, but I think if Ferguson was somehow ageless and didn't slow down, didn't get old, he would have still had such a huge sway over the football decisions, and it wouldn't have got to this point. So I think it's a bit of a heady brew of all these different outcomes, but I do think it's fair to say that if you're going to give Sir Alex Ferguson all the credit in the world for what he's achieved, and I'm very, very happy to do that, like I said, I think he's the best manager in English football history, you can't really ignore some of the other stuff, and he's had a part in that. And so I think that's the best way of answering that question. But no, in short, I don't think he'd get this team back to win titles, because I think they've only got about 2 good players.
Well, what would you do with Anthony?
Exactly.
Anthony would never be anywhere near the club. That's the thing. They wouldn't have spent as poorly, would they?
Well, Jemba, Kleberson, they were. Those players were. The fees were lower because that was the time. But the point is, he got more right than he got wrong.
True. All right, quick break and then more questions. Des on Blue Sky asks this: what are your favourite leagues to watch outside the Premier League?
Good question.
Saudi Pro League, probably.
I've never seen a single minute of it knowingly. So for all I know, it could be good, but I don't think it is. Mine would probably, my favourite would probably be the Bundesliga.
Same.
I don't know if that's because it's the most similar to the Premier League in terms of the pace of it or whatever, or the way it's refereed or whatever. But the reason for that is because I'm fortunate enough to have gone to a load of Bundesliga games, and I don't think there's anything quite like going to a game in Germany, particularly when it's under the lights and the culture around it and being a part of it. And I think that massively informs and sways my opinion of it. I find the Spanish league and the Italian leagues don't really retain my interest as well. And I think the Bundesliga for me would be my answer.
I think it's a good answer.
Yeah, I think, when I sort of do my weekly kind of roundup of the stuff that's been going on in Europe, like highlights wise, it is the Bundesliga that I find myself most wrapped to. The sort of obviously, when Bayern running away with it most seasons, in theory, should make it less interesting. But the thing is, they quite often win like 6, 7, 8-0, and it's an absolute dazzling display from them. So there's the sort of aesthetic of that, but also there seems to be a lot of really, really quality players that kind of fly under the radar there. Omar Marmoush is a great example at the moment, a player who's about to, I would expect, explode for Man City. And it's a really, really high quality league. And actually, sometimes I agree, like Serie A just doesn't quite cut it in the way it did. La Liga, I am a sucker for Real Madrid and Barcelona and Atletico as well. But generally, I think the Bundesliga is just far more fun. It's a fun league.
Yeah, I go along with that. I think, though, that the old romantic in me would probably say La Liga, though. I think Serie A was obviously one we watched because the games were available on terrestrial TV here. But I think with the
going back some time now, though, eh?
Yeah, of course. I think the Bundesliga, though, I think if you watch, I mean, again, the Premier League is so all-consuming that if you just feast your eyes on that, you've got more than enough on your plate, of course. I mean, if it was going to be cheeky, I might say the Championship, despite my showing on Jack's Encyclopedia yesterday. But that's because often Fulham are down there. The Championship might be one.
I would say it depends if Pompey are home or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would say I suspect the spirit of the question is probably more foreign leagues. I would probably watch La Liga over the Bundesliga.
I think if you're a genuine football fan, and we have to remember a lot of people now really are just they the amount of conversations I get into with people who are listens to the Ramble and they come over and start talking to you about stuff. And the thing they're going to talk to you about is football, right? Obviously. And the amount of, I would say it's north of 50% for sure that once you start talking to them, it becomes clear they're actually just a fan of their club and not of football generally. Right. And if you, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. If you follow your team home and away and that's what you're all about, all good. But I think that if you're a genuine football fan with a capital F on both those words, you should be able to find a lot to enjoy in all these different leagues, really. I just think my personal preference would be the Bundesliga.
Okay. Luke, you got the next question.
I have. It's from Nick Gee on Discord. I've actually already answered this question to Nick on the Discord itself, but I appreciate a lot of our listeners aren't on the Discord, so I'll answer it again. What are your favourite football or sports books that you've read? Jim?
The obvious one for me would be Diego Maradona's autobiography. It's called simply El Diego. We've spoken about it quite a lot. It's chaos on every page. He insists he's never cheated on his wife every 4 or 5 pages. As we've discussed many, many times, there's a brilliant section at the beginning, which is almost a sort of like a glossary of phrases where the author, Marcela Mora y Araujo, explains that there are a lot of phrases that sound like they are just strange translations, but they are in fact just things he's made up himself to mean certain things. Like, he should give the dog his face back. I think that was someone's being hypocritical. Thermos head was just someone he didn't like. Loads and loads of things like that. And obviously the man was a genius, had a really chaotic life, and it's a great insight into that. Can't recommend it enough. Fever Pitch as well, obviously, is a really great piece of, quite emotional sports writing. Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't really like it.
Oh, why is that?
I just couldn't get into it. I don't know why. I've read quite a lot of Nick Hornby's books. I've read Juliet Naked, which I really liked. I've read the one about the record shop, which is named
High Fidelity,
which I really liked. I just couldn't get into that for some reason. Possibly because I just don't care enough about Arsenal,
Maybe it's that. Yeah. Obviously, I'm. Again, look at that through a different lens.
I accept it. It's a classic. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's not really my thing. I'll give you a quick top 5 if you like. The top 5 that I gave on the Discord across different sports, because that's the question. So, Paper Lion by George Plimpton, which is a book about set in the 60s, about where he convinces the coaching staff of the Detroit Lions to let him try out all pre-season as a quarterback, and then they don't tell any of the other players that he's not really a quarterback, and it sees how long he can basically be a part of it. Provided You Don't Kiss Me by Duncan Hamilton, which is a brilliant antidote to David Peace's book about Brian Clough, The Damn United, which of course is a fictionalised version. Provided You Don't Kiss Me is Duncan Hamilton spent a long old time covering Forest in the classic Clough years, and he has amazing access into his character. Really, really well.
Oh yeah, that's
brilliant. Slaying the Badger by Richard Moore, the late great Richard Moore, which is a book about the Tour de France and about Greg LeMond's attempts to try and beat Bernard Hinault, whose nickname was the Badger. Just amazing characters in that book. And the final 2, I'd say, both boxing books. One is Dark Trade by Don McRae, which is a classic, an absolute classic of the moral ambiguities of boxing as a sport, told through the eyes of several top level fighters. And the final one is also a boxing book, which is it's called This Bloody Mary Is the Last Thing I Own by Jonathan Rendell, which is an incredible journey through boxing in the first person from Jonathan Rendell, who's actually sadly died now, but who started out doing a little bit of promotion in East London for a couple of British fighters, and ends up going all the way up through to Vegas. But he takes in a load of old Cuban fighters and ends up destitute on the Las Vegas Strip. Hence the name of the book. Brilliant. All 5 of those are absolute classic sports books.
I would say the book I would say is by Graham McCall, How a Nation Lost the World Cup, 1978, Scotland, off to the World Cup in Argentina. It's brilliant. Ali MacLeod is a man that everybody in Britain should know about. He died back in 2004, but like the charisma of the man to get everybody going, to send Scotland off to the World Cup. Now, obviously, I wasn't alive in '78, and I don't know how many Scottish people thought they were in for a shout with the 1978 World Cup, but he believed, and he got people believing that they really, really could do something. And with the squad of players they had, it wasn't absolutely outrageous. And
apparently he came into the first squad as the Scotland manager. To all the players, sat him down and said, "My name is Ali MacLeod and I am a winner."
Yeah. the open-top bus parades before they went off. It was almost like around the cities and to the airport we're off. You know, it was quite something. But it's an entertaining book. And of course, it worked out. Scotland went out in the first round. There's no surprises. But the fact is that they went there, and the mood of the nation was how a nation lost the book. It's a great title for a book as well.
I would add, throw into the mix, it's worth our old friend Jonathan Wilson's Inverting the Pyramid.
Of course,
sure.
Because it's about tactics, and it gives you a really good foundation. If you're someone who's kind of quite new to football or whatever, it gives you a really good foundation. The reason we always mention it on this show whenever it comes up, and Jonathan always messages me saying, "Thanks for the mention. I'm up to 74th in the Amazon charts now," because it in an accessible, interesting way, it gives you a foundation to the evolution of how tactics are and how we get to where we are now. And every few years or so, he releases another version with an updated chapter in it of what's happening now. It's a really, really brilliant read. So well worth doing.
Yes. Absolutely. Another little niche one as well is The Greatest Footballer You Never Saw, which is a story of Robin Friday.
I've read that.
It's kind of a sort of tragic story because he was a player everyone thought was really, really gifted. Back in, most football wasn't on TV, so you'd hear these rumours of legendary players. He spent most of his career at Reading, was this kind of really, really flamboyant, talented, like George Best rock star style player. But he led a very kind of chaotic, quite reckless life, and unfortunately died very young. Everybody insisted he had what it took to go to the very, very top, and it was back in the times when perhaps the gap between the first division and the second division weren't quite as big. So it's a real interesting insight into that kind of figure. It's by Paolo Hewitt and Paul McGuigan, and if you're thinking Paul McGuigan from Oasis, you would be absolutely right. It is that same Paul McGuigan.
What did he do in Mark Lawrenson's boot bag?
The rumour was that he took a shit in it. Lawrenson's always denied it, but you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Actually, he'd been sent off for kicking him in the face, that's what he did when he went back to the changing rooms.
I think it's one of those players. He's one of those players who kind of his myth grows larger as the years pass. But I also like that Gwigsy from Oasis first famously said that Oasis were fifth on a list of his favourite things to do.
It was behind football, cricket,
Doctor Who, weed and Man City.
Oh, there you go.
Anyway, let's have the final question.
Jimbo.
Final question is from Joe on the Discord, and he says, with Jose Mourinho having come out with his own wine, which other people in the football sphere do you think are most likely to release their own alcoholic beverage?
Vardy.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that because Rebecca Vardy and Dennis Wise have recently released an Alcopop based on Jamie Vardy's vodka Skittle recipe, and I don't know that any made-up answer can sort of top that.
None of that makes any sense. Well, why is Dennis Wise involved?
Because they were in the jungle together, obviously.
Right, okay. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, there's a promotional video of her concocting it in a lab and inviting him over.
Oh, my goodness.
And then they fall out in the video for some reason.
I don't think you can top that, can you?
No, you can't. I was going to say that soon enough Gianni Infantino's going to do that, and he's going to bring it.
It'll be like a gold
Goldschlager.
Yeah.
Like it cuts your throat and you get drunk quicker because it gets in your bloodstream. It doesn't. Do you remember that rumour?
Yeah, I do.
Stupid.
The only serious answer is, I would say, is surely, and he's probably already done it. I don't know if he has, but Carlo Ancelotti's famous for having a glass of wine, and I think if Ancelotti's name was on a bottle, I think people would go,
Pirlo
has a vineyard, doesn't he?
Pirlo does.
Tedious, that, isn't it? Fucking tedious.
You think?
The type of people that think that's cool is tedious. That's not Pirlo's fault. But do you remember we had to all go through that last season of Pirlo's career where he'd do like a 10-yard square pass, then we'd go look at the vision on the man.
Yeah.
And they started that rumour that he had such a bad knee injury once that he wasn't sure he could play, and the manager really needed him. So he said, "It's okay, boss. I'll just go out there and I'll just play with one foot." And he was man of the match. Fuck off, making shit up.
What? Yeah, you still have your no Pirlo, no party T-shirt.
The people who say, "Oh, you know that Zinedine Zidane was so good, he was never once caught off." So what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. People just come up with stupid shit.
Yeah, although it is true that I think Tom Kenny's only given the ball away once in the Premier League. And that was a shot.
Yeah. So he should bring out his own bottled water. Yeah. There you go.
Thanks for listening to the Football Ramble Mailbag, part of the Acast Creator Network. All three of us will be back on Monday with Petey to react to the weekend's football. Please
hope Chelsea win after what we said.
Indeed, yeah, we went big on that. Please do send us your responses, opinions and questions for next week's episode of the Mailbag.
It'd be brilliant to get a few people's recommendations on sports books.
Yeah.
Help us out.
You can follow us on X, Blue Sky, TikTok and Instagram at Football Ramble, and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, Luke.
If you are still on X at this point, you are morally repugnant. See you later.
Thanks, Jim.
See ya.
See you on X, everybody.